All right, so the first thing we're going to review this year, and I wanted to do something kind of easy because I'm still getting to know you and you're getting to know the technology that we're going to use in class. And kind of wanted to ease into the review. So I feel like a lot of you probably reviewed the numbers in Spanish 1. We're going to just review the numbers up to 100. And then you're going to do a little practice with that. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and say the numbers from 1 to 10. I want you to repeat after me. And the good thing about Spanish, it kind of makes logical sense when you're counting. If you know the numbers from 1 to 10, you pretty much know how to count up to 100. And I'm going to talk about what I mean, but we'll start with 1 to 10 first because these are really probably the most important numbers. I'm going to say them and I want you to just go ahead and repeat them after me, okay? So 1, I'm going to start there. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis, siete, ocho, nueve, 10. So one's going to be missing here. I'm going to go ahead and ask you which one is missing and see if you can go ahead and say that in Spanish. So, ¿qué número falta? Which one is missing? Cuatro, falta cuatro. ¿Y ahora qué número falta? Falta 10. ¿Y ahora qué número falta? Falta uno. ¿Y ahora qué número falta? Tres. Falta tres. ¿Y ahora qué número falta? Falta seis. All right, so if you know the numbers from 1 to 10, then going from 10 all the way up to 20, it's going to kind of, a lot of these are going to kind of make sense because you're going to hear the same sounds that you heard in the digits from 1 to 10. And I'll kind of show you like uno, right, is 1, and 11 is once. So you hear a little bit of that same sound, right? The word for 2 was dos. So it makes sense that 12 is doce. You can hear the dos sound in there. And 3 is tres. So you're going to hear that same sound in trece, which is 13. And then 4, remember that's cuatro. And this isn't perfect, but you can hear a little bit of the cuatro sound in 14, which is catorce. And then when you get to 15, this one's actually not going to sound very much like cinco, but we do have words in English that have to do with the number 5, like quintuplet, which means 5 babies, right? So we have cognates that have to do with this sound, but 15 is quince. And you may have heard of teenagers in Latin America when they have a party when they turn 15, right? That's a quinceañera, and that's pretty common in Latin American countries. Um, and then once we get above 15, remember that the number for 10 was diez, right? So basically what we're going to do from from 16, sorry, all the way up to 20 is we're going to be saying 10 and whatever the digit is. So for 16, for example, we're basically saying 10 and 6. Okay? So remember that the number for 10 was diez, the number for 6 was seis. So 16 is dieciséis. And you may remember from Spanish 1 last year that the way that you say and in Spanish is e, which is spelled as a y generally, right? Here, we're going to kind of squish this word together so that we have 10 and 6. So the Z in DS is dropped and it's changed to a C. And then that Y changes to an I and the words kind of squished together, but it still sounds like 10 and 6 in Spanish. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing with 17, which remember that's 10 and 7, right? So diecisiete. And by the way, this squishing this together into one word, Um, there are people now that will sometimes write this as the word DS with a Z at the end, and then a second word, which is Y for and then a third word, which is siete. And that is becoming somewhat accepted, but this is squishing it together like this into one word is a traditional way of doing this. So we want 10 and 8 for 18, right? So 18. And then 10 and 9 for 19, so 19. And then once we get above that, we get to 20. If you've ever been to Starbucks and ordered a venti anything, the reason it's called a venti is because it's 20 ounces, and that's how you say 20 in Italian, which is pretty close to Spanish. So the word for 20 in Spanish is veinte. And then we're going to kind of do what we did when we were in the teens, where we take the word 20 and then add the next digit, right? So for 20, and then one we're saying basically saying 20 and 1 in Spanish. And once again, this is squished into one word, right? um this only happens in the 20s in Spanish. Once we get to 30 and 40 and 50, this isn't going to happen where it gets all squished together, although it's going to sound similar. But when you write out the 20s, it's important to remember that you don't write this out as three words. It's written out as one word that's all together. Okay, so for 21, we're basically saying 20 and 1, so we're going to say 21. 22, the same thing, 20 and 2, so 22. 23, 23, and so on. I'm just going to go ahead and say the rest of them: 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. And then we're going to go on to some bigger numbers. So remember that the word for three in Spanish was tres, right? You can kind of hear that sound in the word for 30, which is treinta. The word for four was cuatro, and you can hear a little bit of that sound in cuarenta, which is 40. And then the word for five was cinco, right? So cincuenta makes sense. You can hear that sound. When we get to 60 and 70, these can sometimes be confusing because, well, if you look at it, you can probably tell me why it's confusing. And that's because there's only one letter difference between these two words, right? But if you think about the word for six was seis, which ends with an S, then it makes sense that it's sesenta for 60. And then the word for seven was siete with a T, right? So that makes sense that the word for 70 then is setenta. And then the next ones are easier. Ocho was 8, right? So ochenta. And then 9 was nueve. So 90 would be noventa. And then all the way up to cien, which is as far as we're going to go right now. We have a lot of words in English that are actually cognates from 100. So, for example, a cent is 1/100th of a dollar, right? A century is a period of time that's 100 years. A centennial celebrates a 100th year anniversary. So we actually have a lot of cognates that come from this word from for 100 in Spanish. So if I wanted to say 34, for example, how would I do that? So I'm going to show you on the next slide. When you count above 30, you're basically adding the word and in Spanish, which we just talked about. It's E, which is a Y. And then you add the digit between 1 and 9. But now it's going to look like, when you write it out, it's going to look like three words. Okay? So for example, the number 38, basically we're adding the word treinta, the word y, which means and the word ocho. So when you say it, it's going to be 38. And notice that when I say it, I don't say 38. I don't really separate them out when I say it. When you say it, it does kind of squish together, almost like it did when we did the 20s. But it is technically three words when you write it out. So 38, 38. All right, and go ahead and repeat these after me. So 57, we're going to say 5 and 7, right? So 57. And then 92, if we wanted to do that one, we're going to say 90 and 2 in Spanish. So you would say this one, 92. And that's as far as we're going to get with the numbers for today.